transaction machine. A little bit about me. Thanks for the great intro. Feel free to reach out over email or Twitter. Currently chief of staff at Block Native. I've been with them for about 3.5 years, full-time for about 2. I'm an advisor to Spritz. Shout out to Zuz, who's joining. She's also the chief of staff over at Spritz. Have launched a security token, and way back when in 2017 was building an NFT-enabled sci-fi universe. That was sort of before we could even use the word NFT because nobody really knew what the hell those were back then. But first question, who here knows what SMTP protocol is? Give a raise of hand or shout out in chat if you know what it is. Okay, so not many people know what SMTP protocol is. Who sent an email today? Cool, pretty much everyone has sent an email today. So you've used SMTP protocol today. And we're going to be talking a lot about protocols and protocol design because this is really at the crux of what blockchain is building. Blockchains are building open protocols for money, for transactions, for the web. And most people don't really know what protocols they use day to day because they're pretty low level and they're pretty technical. And I like to say we're still sort of designing and building the SMTP protocols for Web3. And we really haven't had the AOL or the Gmail moment that makes these protocols really accessible to the masses. But it all started with Web3 and with Bitcoin. Who here has read the Bitcoin white paper? Cool, not many people. If you really want to go deep down in this space, for me, the Bitcoin white paper and the Ethereum white paper are required readings because those are the 2 foundational pieces of knowledge that sort of kickstarted the entire ecosystem. And the Bitcoin white paper you could read in 20 minutes. The Ethereum white paper you can read in about 20 minutes. You can skip the heavy technical math sections that might be a little scary, but like in general, these are really accessible pieces of communication that are fundamental for anyone who's trying to understand where we are and where we're going. And, you know, people like to talk about Bitcoin capital B, the cryptocurrency. And this is, you know, what makes headlines when Bitcoin's at 30,000, when it drops to 15,000, when it's at 60,000. This is the market and people love talking about prices. And today we're not going to talk about the price of Bitcoin at all. You know, people say they're in Bitcoin for the tech, but largely they're in it for the money. We're going to instead talk about Bitcoin, lowercase b, the blockchain. And it turns out with Bitcoin, the blockchain, you can actually do a lot more than just talk about the price of Bitcoin. And once you start to really understand blockchains and transaction machines, they sort of have a red pill moment when you start to apply this technology to everything. So today, Bitcoin, the blockchain, you can issue digital certificates. You can tie other blockchains and smart contracting layers to it. And this is where a lot of the interesting innovation is actually happening on the blockchain layer, not really on the cryptocurrency or the price layer. But before we dive into where blockchain is heading, I think it's really important for us to take a beat and talk about how we got here. So the internet kind of all came out of the Cold War. And this is a really important fundamental thing to know. ARPANET was designed for decentralization, and it was designed for decentralization because the military industrial complex in the US wanted to build a communication network where one failure wouldn't take down the entire network. It was supposed to be decentralized, self-routing, self-healing. So in the event of a, say, nuclear attack from the Soviets, America could, Counter-Strike could still have communication network and could, you know, operate our government to some degree of efficacy. And it was this decentralized design that sort of led CERN and Tim Berners-Lee to design the World Wide Web. So it started with the Cold War and it really went into academia and research. And Tim Berners-Lee is famously known for being the guy who designed the World Wide Web and the current internet architecture that we know today. Who here knows what a 404 error is? You probably see these all the time, right? So, you know, this is a common internet error code for when a page doesn't resolve. And the best websites have great memes on these pages. And I want to talk a little bit about the 402 error, which is in the original protocol design for the internet, but isn't used today. And this stands for payment required. So in the original design of the internet, when Tim Berners-Lee came about and built it, they had a notion or a mechanism that would require internet digital native currency, but it sort of never got built out. And it was this missing piece of the internet. So much so that Tim Berners-Lee today is working on his own blockchain-based company to try and like finish this unfinished portion of the internet. Internet payments were part of the protocol, but were never actually designed and built. And over time, the web has become highly centralized. Web 2, we saw these massive gardens really come up with Amazon, Twitter, Google, Facebook, Baidu. And the model for all of these is pretty consistent, where you have an app interface and a username and password, and they own and control and store your data. So when you log into Twitter, Twitter has a database. They may be using AWS or they may be using Google. And when you tweet out, they log that, and then they make that applicable for everybody else to see. It's really great for end users because it's free, it's easy, it's interesting, but it's also not great for end users because you have very little control over your data. And say you start to realize, I don't know, that Instagram is designed to make you feel bad about your life. Well, you're locked into that platform because you can't easily port all of your history, all of your pictures, all of your comments over to another platform. And Web3 is trying to shift this. So in blockchain-based systems, as a user, you own and control your own data and how it's shared, and you can provision that to other apps and other interfaces. And there are some protocols today that are working to enable you to build a decentralized version of Twitter, where you could use your own Dropbox, G Drive, et cetera, and encrypt it with a public-private key pair, and then decide which version of the decentralized Twitter gets to use your data, share it, et cetera. And you can unprovision that data at any time, which gives end users portability, but it comes at a non-trivial technical cost and storage cost. And I like to liken Bitcoin to blockchain as Google is to the internet. It's a specific implementation versus generalized infrastructure. And we're going to talk through this a little bit. Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, is powered by Bitcoin, the blockchain, and Ethereum, a blockchain, is a platform for smart contracts, which are code, not contracts, and it's used by developers to build decentralized applications, also known as dApps. Many cryptocurrencies are actually fungible tokens, ERC20, running on Ethereum, and require gas, Ethereum, to actually transact. So let's take USDC, which is a really popular stable coin. It's a token that runs on the Ethereum blockchain. It also runs on Polygon blockchain. It runs on the Phantom blockchain, and today runs on about a dozen different blockchain networks. And USDC is a stable coin that targets one token to $1 at all times. And we can talk a little bit about protocol design and stable coin design later if that's interesting or useful to people. But OpenSea is a popular dApp you might have used to purchase your NFT, and it enables anyone to buy and sell an NFTs, which are unique tokens on the blockchain network. Now, one interesting thing about OpenSea is they're actually a private closed source application. So, there's some debate in the community if they are truly a dApp. If you contrast that to Uniswap, which is a smart contract driven exchange that has daily transaction volumes that exceed Coinbase, that truly is a decentralized application, because while you could go to Uniswap's website and transact with them, you could also just program a bot or write some code and interface directly with their smart contract, and anyone anywhere could build a better Uniswap interface or integrate that trading implementation into their own application. So one of the really cool thing about smart contracts and about this entire ecosystem is that there are all these little Lego blocks that start to snap together and build something that's way greater than the sum of its whole. And it makes development speeds really easier, and it also helps to bring a lot of trust. If I were to say go launch my own exchange today, I would need to get an audit that probably costs right now about $250,000. I would need to build all the contracts, and then I would need to like actually have liquidity in my marketplace to make it useful to anyone. So if I wanted to build an exchange, there's a tremendous amount of effort and inertia that goes into that. Or I could say, just integrate Uniswap's contracts into my own dApp and then make it easy for people to trade and potentially charge a little bit of a fee on top of that. And suddenly I have a business model that slipstreams into the native transaction flow. So whenever you're thinking about crypto and blockchain-based applications, think about the interoperability of them. And, I like to think that technology shifts our culture, and it happens in really profound ways that aren't even apparent to those that live through them. As a kid, it was sort of implausible to me that my parents had black and white television. And as a small child, I asked them, like, when did the world become colorized? Because if your TV was black and white, then wasn't the world black and white? And I firmly believe that in 15 or 20 years, kids will start to look around at the world and ask their parents, like, tell me about those little books of paper that allowed you to travel. You mean like passports? Yeah, like, weren't they easy to defraud, and what happened if you lost them and all that? Versus we're clearly moving in a world where passports will become digitized and will run on blockchain-based systems. And it all started sort of, if you think about communication as a cultural shift, the post office changed everything in the world and really was a large portion of why America's economy developed in such a profound way. And then we had telegrams, which fueled the rail era and helped to spur the amount of communication and information could quickly flow across the country, which had its upsides and its downsides. It helped to really drive stock market crashes because information freely flowed. Then we got into the phone era, and people could call and actually talk to each other and have real conversations. And then we got into the Netscape era, where people could actually send an email and quickly communicate. And the velocity of communication in the economy started to really pick up. And by the time we got to the cell phone era, people are sending thousands of communications a day and probably not even thinking about where in the world they're communicating with. And if you contrast that to the start, when we were in the postal era, like, communication was slow and was expensive and took a lot of time. Today, financial transactions are kind of stuck in the era of the post office. I don't know if anybody has sent a wire lately, but it's really slow, it's really expensive, and it's kind of a giant pain in the ass. And sometimes you have to actually like go show up at a bank to do it. And like, sure, Venmo makes it really quick and easy and seamless, but that doesn't work everywhere and has its own set of headaches. But like, the velocity of transactions has definitely increased over the last 10 years. And with blockchain, we're on the precipice of really having this explosion of transactions in the economy, where I have some friends today who don't get paid on the 1st and 15th of every month. Instead, their salary is streaming to them in real time, and every second their wallet is accruing more and more value as their paycheck slipstreams in. And when you shift your thinking about how transactions like that happen, sort of unlocks whole new possibilities for engaging with the world and transacting with the world. And that velocity of money combined with the open protocols and the Lego building approach means we're just at the start of an explosion of new forms of behavior, new forms of technology. And blockchains are underpinning all of this. And we're still just at the really early days of developing these protocols and helping to stand up the world of Web3. I'm going to pause. Any questions so far, or we can dig in a little bit? I have a few slides to talk about NFTs and DAOs. Feel free to come off mute. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about NFTs. So I like to start first by talking about fungible versus non-fungible tokens. So $1 is worth $1 is worth $1 all day, every day. And 1 ETH is worth 1 ETH is worth 1 ETH. Fungible tokens are not unique. They are assets that are identical to every other one in existence. They are divisible. You can, send a quarter, you could send 0.001 ETH. They're useful for currency, for utility, for securities. They're standards. But contrast that with non-fungible. So one CryptoPunk is not worth one CryptoPunk is not worth one CryptoPunk. They are unique digital items. They are not interchangeable. You wouldn't take CryptoPunk 2997 in exchange for CryptoPunk #1. And non-fungible tokens today run off of usually ERC 721 standards, but there are definitely other standards that are working and coming out in the world. And non-fungible tokens aren't just digital JPEGs, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The benefits of these, you can prove rarity and uniqueness, you can prove authenticity, you can track the history of ownership. So maybe an NFT that Vitalik Buterin has owned is worth more because you can show that this NFT was at one point in time owned by Vitalik and now you own it. And there's that sort of God-like effect around Vitalik. So people are willing to pay more because it was through his wallet. There's transparency in it, and revenue and royalties. And for artists, NFTs are the first time in the history of the world where artists can actually make money off of the resale market. So many artists code their contracts so that somewhere between 5 and 15% of profits on the secondary market go back to them. And imagine that every time Picasso sold a painting and then somebody went and auctioned it at Sotheby's, a portion of that profit would go back to Picasso and his family. And he's able to generate a lot of revenue over time because he gained in importance and he continued to produce work that was notable and really captured the zeitgeist. Naval had this talk about NFTs tokenizing all things, and we're going from a world where every protocol has a token to where every dApp has a token to where every digital valuable good has a token, and public blockchains will be the title registry for everything of value. Ultimately, NFTs will authenticate the world. But what actually is an NFT? So there's JPEGs, which we've all talked about quite a bit. And these are the things that the news talk about, but it's such a narrow view of what the world of NFTs are. Your house is an NFT. Would you trade your house for another house? I mean, maybe, but probably not. Homes are all super unique and have their own characteristics to it. And they all should be denoted as NFTs, and your mortgage should exist as an NFT. And the idea that you have to get title insurance to prove that you're, just in case somebody somewhere in some county clerk office didn't actually send you your title or had some claim against it is sort of bananas when you think about it. We don't actually know what the provenance of our homes are. And there's actually protocols today that will turn your house into an NFT like Centrifuge, and you can go and get a loan out against it and collateralize your home and access new forms of capital in new ways. Humans are all NFTs, and soon our identities will start to be listed on public blockchain records as unique digital items. And it's worth noting that the state of New York actually represents all of their vaccines for COVID as unique digital token registries on a blockchain-based system. Now, that's not a public blockchain. It's not running on Ethereum. It's running on a private permission blockchain that's authored by IBM and Hyperledger, but it's built on open standards, and it does have some amount of interoperability. So when you think NFT, don't just think JPEG. Anything that is truly unique and scarce in the world should be and can be represented as an NFT. Let's talk a little bit about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization, or how Web3 is trying to reboot the corporation. There are governance aspects. DAOs are open, transparent, enable anyone to participate. They make decision-making public and collective. If you're a member of a DAO, you can post on any forum and start to actually vote on and decide the future of it. Their finances tend to be controlled by smart contracts. The incentives are pretty great for token holders. They can award tokens to many stakeholders and drive incentives. Revenues and royalties are public and automated. And we're actually seeing some states are recognizing DAOs as a true form of incorporation. So there's blockchain-based LLCs now, and I believe it's Wyoming actually recognizes DAOs, and you can incorporate a DAO in the state, and it is viewed as a public form of governance, just like an LLC, an S Corp, or a C Corp. A firm, as Naval said, is just a nexus of contracts: payroll contracts with employees, profit contracts with shareholders, debt contracts with lenders, delivery contracts with customers, tax contracts. And blockchain smart contracts are eventually trying to reinvent the firm, because I don't know about you, but as a chief of staff, I spend a lot of time dealing with contracts, dealing with payroll, dealing with shareholders, dealing with taxes. And if we can automate away all of that complexity and make it much easier for people to start new firms and to drive new innovation, I'm a firm believer it will create an explosion of new types of corporation, new types of organizations. And we are just living at the start of a new era. So in the 90s, you could kind of squint into the future and imagine that the vast majority of the world would go online, but it would take a little bit of time. And you probably in the 90s couldn't see the smartphone revolution coming and the whole new industry that would spur. And today, we can kind of squint and see in the next 5 or 10 years that it's pretty conceivable the vast majority of transactions are going to go on chain, while the vast majority of them today are off chain. And once the vast majority of transactions in the world are on chain, it's pretty hard to imagine what the new possibilities are going to be, but it will create new paradigms and all host of new opportunities for those that are working, building, and operating in this new global shift. I mean, it's kind of crazy today, but the total value of all of blockchains, all of DeFi, all of NFTs is still smaller than the estimated amount of money that is laundered through traditional financial services. So global money laundering is still larger than global cryptocurrency. And the pace of innovation is growing exponentially in global crypto markets. Any questions? That was the presentation.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was very timely too. Thank you, man. Great presentation. As far as questions go, look, we're gonna be pretty active here. You guys can come off of, you can raise your hand to come off of mute, as well as just dropping the questions in chat. So we're gonna kind of play this kind of roundtable style, so feel free to jump up.
Can you give an example of a smart contract being implemented with financial transactions? What would that entail? And
yeah, so there are a number of protocols today that are DeFi, decentralized finance, and they range from algorithmic stable coins like Maker and the DAI protocol. And let's talk about Maker for a minute. So Maker is arguably the most important stable coin in the world right now. It is decentralized, so anyone anywhere in the world can go and create new DAI, which is a stable coin. And the way that you create DAI is you take an asset like Ethereum, but they also accept other assets, and you enter it into a collateralized debt position. So you can go and say you had 1 ETH and you want it to take a loan out for 1,000 DAI, you could then essentially enter into that smart contract, collateralize it. So you need to have more than $1,000 worth of value, and they'll give you 1,000 DAI, and you can go and spend those. You can do whatever you want with it. And it's just up to you to make sure that you maintain your collateralization. Otherwise, they could potentially liquidate your underlying collateral if your loan became under collateralized. And that's how they maintain their peg as a system. Does that give you a good representation?
Yes, it does.
Cool.
Our next question is from Douglas. Can you explain DAO members contributing labor and expertise and getting coin in return? And Douglas, feel free to come elaborate if you'd like to.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, that is my question. I guess the flavor around it is I'm not a member of a DAO, but I'm interested in it, and I hear that the way that people like quote get paid, and I use paid loosely, right?
Yeah.
You can be paid in actual coin, which you can submit for dollars, you can change for dollars, you can get paid in prestige, you can get paid in notoriety. There's a lot of ways to get paid, right? Um, uh, so if you could just run that through that, well, I won't answer it for you. Can you just?
Yeah, there are 1,000 different ways to get involved in DAOs. They tend to be pretty chaotic, frankly, to get onboarded into, because there's quite a bit of activation energy that's required to actually like get into a DAO. And the way it works today is usually you join a Discord, usually you start posting, you may be able to join an onboarding call with the DAO. Larger, well-organized DAOs tend to run those weekly or monthly to onboard new members and help introduce them to the ecosystem. And then typically DAOs, you can either propose work, or some DAOs have open work boards that you can contribute to, and either you get paid in the native token of the DAO, or they'll pay you in like DAI or USDC just to keep it easy. It depends upon the DAO's treasury. But to give a super specific example, there's a colleague of mine who's half-time at Block Native, spends his other half of his time running Meta Factory, which is a decentralized autonomous organization that's just a merch store. So they like design and launch swag for other DAOs, and they collaborate with them. They have their robot token. And a friend of mine recently joined the DAO and is working with them on designing some membership, some swag that she's going to launch with the DAO, and she'll get a percentage of the royalties from any of the swag sold.
And okay, that's great. The percentage of the royalties is paid in the coin of the DAO, right?
In this particular instance, yes, it is paid in the token of the DAO. There are also the notion a lot of DAOs will launch bounties, which Gitcoin is the most popular bounty platform in the world. And often those are denominated in USDC or DAI, but it's really up to the DAO what they want to do and how they want to structure their treasury.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Twali.xyz is also a fun, there's sort of like a meta DAO that organizes and helps to find opportunities for you to contribute across different DAOs. I would check them out, and I would check Gitcoin out, and you can kind of see some of how different DAOs are posting work and trying to get people to contribute.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and in general in Web3, you kind of have to be super flexible with hiring people, especially if you're trying to find folks who are deeply talented. It's not uncommon for somebody to spend 25 or 50% of their time on one project, and then the other portion of their time working across other projects, which is why being really clear about what work is being done and how it's structured and how it's paid, it helps to enable people to sort of work in this gig-ish type of way.
Gotcha, thanks.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much. It was, wow, it was awesome. Thank you. I feel like I got a crash course. So yeah, my question is, I feel like the whole chief of staff profession is that you have to be a generalist, right? So for me, it's always very interesting to try to understand how much you need to be an expert in the specific industry that you're dealing with, or the company you work for. And so I'm curious, what do you think about that? Like, if you look at your day-to-day job, how much, I mean, you're obviously very enthusiastic, right? But if you look at the requirement, if you just think about new chief of staff trying to go into the Web3 world, what would you, suggest them how to get started? What level of expertise should they really, acquire before applying to a job?
That's a great question. And I will say, at Block Native, we're now a team of 30. We've hired about 14 people this year. 2 years ago, we were 6 people. So we've hired quite a bit. And one of our biggest takeaways is we will not hire people who are not like Web3 native, just because of what we do. It's so specialized. Taking a step back, at Block Native, we're the leading pre-chain API company. So we build tooling that supports 12 of the top 20 DeFi protocols, many top NFT platforms, many top traders, and our generalized infrastructure monitors every global in-flight transaction and describes how every public blockchain transaction becomes part of their corresponding blockchain. And what we do is pretty deep down the rabbit hole and pretty nitty gritty. And if somebody's not already down the journey themselves, the learning curve is just too steep. So there's the balance between like trying to find people who are strong individual contributors and understand their deep technical expertise, whether that's like SEO, whether that's DevOps engineering, whether that's a chief of staff, but then also cross-referencing, like, do they actually understand how to use cryptocurrency? Have they gone hands-on and engaged with a project? And finding that Venn diagram overlap of people is really hard and takes a ton of time. So if you want to get into Web3, I just shared, my CEO wrote a blog post about blockchain 101 and diving down the crypto rabbit hole. So like, start with the fundamentals, read the Bitcoin white paper, read the Ethereum white paper, and then start to like find what's the intersection of what interests you and what interests like where there's crypto opportunity, and like actually go hands-on in a protocol and maybe join a DAO and contribute a little and like build some proof of work that you can contribute in this space, because it's anyone can start contributing to a DAO, but like then you have a track record of I've worked for a DAO, I like understand this space. Maybe you've bought or sold a couple NFTs, you actually understand how some protocols work, you blogged about it, you've tweeted about it, and then you have a track record of work that shows like, oh yes, this person really groks Web3 and wants to get in it. Because if you're not like super passionate about this, the learning curve is pretty steep and the rabbit hole is really deep, and you probably won't, you just won't have fun working in it.
Thank you.
Sean, you referred to a site that we could go and review different DAOs. That would be interesting. Is that something you'd be able to share with us again?
Yeah,
Or
so
maybe I'll put it into the resources.
Gitcoin is a great platform for finding finding work that you can do, both technical and non-technical. And Twali is a DAO that's trying to make it Web3 really accessible. And they are looking for experts in accounting and venture and legal to help, build content and really work at the intersection of Web3 and traditional SaaS software, Web2, et cetera. And I always suggest to people, like, literally just Google whatever hobby you have plus blockchain and see what comes up, because there's probably somebody building some project that's at the intersection of something you enjoy, and like, start there. Or, if you are newer to the space and you want to actually go hands-on in a decentralized platform, but you don't want to pay the crazy gas fees on Ethereum, go onto Polygon and set up your MetaMask hot wallet and just go use something like Uniswap on the Polygon network. And the process of doing that and like actually setting up a hot wallet, making sure you're on the right network, doing a swap on Uniswap on Polygon, if you've never done that before, that'll take you 5 or 6 hours to do confidently. And it will be scary as shit. Like, you'll think you've probably lost all of your funds, and that's part of the process. And that's why start with really low value amounts and just take $200 if you can afford it and expect to lose all of that, and just start small and start incrementally. Hey.
Hi there. I have a couple of questions, actually. The first is about the merge of Ethereum, which I've heard it's coming in the next months, more or less. The question is if you think that this will have an impact on blockchain spread and Web3 spread and popularization in general, if we'll have an impact. And the second question is more about interoperability and standards. Do you see a problem with that? Do you think that at a certain point there might be kind of an interoperability problem like we had also with Web 1 in the late 90s? do you think that maybe there should be something like a W3C starting to set standards or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those not familiar, the merge refers to something also known as ETH2, also known as Ethereum moving from proof of work to proof of stake. So today, the Ethereum network is validated by miners who spend a lot of computational energy and actual like power energy to validate the blockchain. And the merge refers to the move of proof of stake. So instead of validating the network through computational energy, the network will be validated through value, and there'll be validators and block builders. And you need to stake 32 ETH to run a validator to approve transactions. And if you're found, defrauding the network, you could lose all of that ETH. But in return for validating the network, you'll earn, I think it's 5% staking reward. So like, hey, great. You could actually earn yield on your Ethereum in a way that's generative to the network. And the merge is expected to come sometime this year. It's moving forward pretty aggressively. And like the core dev calls, I've sat in on a few of them. I'm pretty bullish on the merge and its ability to help Ethereum increase its transaction throughput and decrease its energy usage. So Ethereum should reduce its energy usage by about 99% by moving to proof of stake from proof of work, which will make it greener and will help, quell people who have qualms with that. Does that answer your first question?
Yeah, absolutely. Because also me personally, to be honest, with the gas fees, I have some problems because I wanted to make some experiments buying stuff with on the blockchain, but these gas fees are something that blocks me most of the times,
with gas fees, there is, I am a firm believer that there is such a demand for block space for transactions on public blockchain networks that gas fees will be a problem for a long time to come. And even networks that for the last 2 or 3 years, like Polygon's main value proposition was low gas fees. And they actually anchor their blockchain to the Ethereum blockchain. They write snapshots to it every, I think, 15 minutes. But Polygon now has gas problems because it gained in popularity. And anytime a blockchain gains in popularity, people are trying to transact, and you're going to have gas problems because gas is a function of the number of people who are trying to get a transaction into the block space. And there are scalability solutions that are coming. There are layer 2 networks that tie to layer 1s that help make it more affordable. And for different protocols, it's all about, there is a real decision and a trade-off to be made when you launch on Ethereum versus launching on an L2. And that's a pretty deep conversation. But one of the great things about the Ethereum ecosystem is that it has started to build standards, to your second question, like ERC 721, ERC 20, and Solidity smart contracts. So it makes it really easy for somebody who's built, say, a smart contract and a token on Ethereum to then go and move it to Polygon or Arbitrum or Optimism, these scalability solutions, and try and build their ecosystem and provide lower cost transactions. The industry seems to be coalescing around a lot of these open source standards, but not all blockchain ecosystems are. Like Solana is not necessarily compatible with Ethereum, and people are working on trying to build bridges to help value locked in one ecosystem move to another ecosystem. But yeah, a lot of standards still need to be set. The WC3 forum is working on some standards, notably around decentralized identity, the DID standard, but not necessarily standards around tokens. Those have sort of emerged organically and largely driven by the Ethereum ecosystem.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Aziz,
Sean.
hey, how are you?
Good, thank you for the time. I just had a quick question on your view, just in general, in terms of the play to own space, play to earn, play to own, and just kind of how we've seen the emergence of these happen over the last year and a half, call it, and how you think that's going to kind of change the crypto landscape in general, if at all, especially around NFT ownership.
Yeah. I mean, I remember as a kid, like trying to convince my parents to let me create a PayPal account so I could buy a Counter-Strike skin from someone else. And people for a long time have always wanted to buy and sell in-game items, prove scarcity, and in-game items as represented as NFTs make it easy to build marketplaces, make it easy for interoperability, which I think is a super exciting but definitely very nascent thing. Game development is super hard, and even like fully owned assets that are not open source NFTs are difficult for game developers like Electronic Arts to really port from one game to another. In the play to own space, my biggest question that I've never been able to get a satisfying answer is like, why does number go up? So we take Axie Infinity, which is a massive blockchain game, and the value of their assets is just driven exponentially to the point now where it's like $6,000 to get started playing the game. And they sort of, to me, creates a death spiral where as your game becomes more successful, it becomes less accessible to people. And then like suddenly at some point, nobody's able to afford to play your game. So what happens to the ecosystem then? Does it just start to crash? And we've kind of seen that a little bit with Axie and some of the play to earn games, but like they're definitely, to me, we're in like V1 of NFTs and play to own games. And there will be a lot of iteration to come to figure out what models will work.
Thanks.
Aziz, you're talking Sol and Avex. Do you have specific questions or thoughts on those ecosystems? Maybe not. Duraj, do you have any specific questions about Web3 or DAOs?
Oh, no, I was just sharing a resource that I was familiar with because there were a few people expressed interest in learning about DAOs, so I figured I'd throw that out there.
Cool. Are you a member of any DAOs?
I'm not. No, I'm actually mostly interested in crypto from an investment standpoint, not as much, participation role.
Yeah, that tends to be how a lot of people get started. And I always recommend like, hey, if you're interested in the space, like just start to passively accumulate. And one of the best ways to passively accumulate is get rid of your credit card that gets you fly miles and switch to a credit card that gets you Bitcoin or Ethereum. Gemini has one, BlockFi has one, and you can passively earn some crypto every time you go and swipe a credit card. And it's a cost-free way to gain some exposure for people that are kind of new to the space and unsure about it.
Coinbase has one as well.
I thought there was a debit card.
It's a debit card. Yeah, you're right. It's not a credit card.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe there's only 2 credit cards on the market. The debit card's also cool. And I have friends who are, convert USDC every month to use that as a debit card and spend it and get their rewards. And there's also platforms like Zeus is working on Spritz, where they're making it easy to pay your bills in crypto, and you might potentially be able to get some tokens for doing that.
Yeah, fair point.
All right. Well, Sean, thank you. Let me leave with one question around maybe the opportunities that the NFTs and blockchain maybe present for us as businesses, as communities. Is there specific plays or developments that might be interesting to someone in their role as a chief of staff, or something that they could bring up to their team? And I say this because I'll give you just one thought is, so I run a Startup Grind chapter, and Startup Grind just released the DAO accelerator, right? So an ability for and it's so new, right? But it's starting to come into play for communities as a way to not only validate membership, but also to reward community members in the long haul. Obviously, we haven't seen any of that here at On Deck, and it's very new. It's very much in that Discord space. It's for the NFTs, but it is an extremely interesting form of solidifying membership access and long-term engagement for communities and teams. So just is there anything around the business landscape that that might be interesting to our chief of staff community here?
Yeah, I would say there's a ton of blue ocean opportunity here, but also I would caution people to think about like, why is this actually useful to end users? Don't just launch a token to launch a token, because like, who gives a shit if you launch a token, frankly, like no one. But if you launch a token that actually provides utility and can be explained simply to your end users, then like, oh, there's a compelling reason for people to care about it. And like Disney, to their credit, did this in a really powerful way where they launched NFTs, and initially it gave you a free year of Disney Plus. And now they're layering on like, oh, if you own our NFT, we'll give you discounts at our park and discounts on merch. And like for their community of people, like, oh, that's a compelling value proposition and a reason for someone to purchase an NFT. Or, hey, Adidas launched some rare merch that you could only buy if you owned a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT, and you had to actually provision your wallet and prove that you owned it to get the merch. So like using NFTs as scarce resources to gate experiences, awesome. But what does your community care about, and why should there be an NFT? Frankly, if you're like in a B2B SaaS company, it probably doesn't matter. But if you're doing something consumer facing, start with the whiteboard of what could you do that your community would care about, and then lead from there.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's an exciting space, Sean, and we're very grateful to have you sharing with us today. Really appreciate it. And obviously all the links, everyone, we will be sharing them in the post notes in the library. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with, Sean, before we close out? Forms of contact outside of obviously the great resources we already have available to us.
Yeah, feel free to shoot me an email, connect on Twitter, connect in the On Deck Slack.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll have everything posted soon, and have a great rest of your week. Sean, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.